Hey, how you doing, guys? All right, so this video is intended to help you decide whether or not you might want your peerScholar assignment regraded. And so really my goal here is to be as clear as possible about the situation, the way we grade, the measures we take to ensure the grades are fair, and the process that we will use should you ask for a regrade. And hopefully all of those things will help you make your decision. I want to begin by being very clear about something. Just in a general sense, we spend a lot of time training our TAs to mark well and to mark consistently, both across the things they grade, but also across the TAs. And so because of this, my default position is that I feel very comfortable and very much behind the grades that my TAs provide. I do not believe there will be a problem. I believe that most of the grades, if not all of the grades that are provided, are accurate, good grades. And in fact, in the past, I have not offered a regrade option because I believe in my TAs that much. So all this to say, the probability that anything went wrong in the grading of your assignment, in my mind, is extremely small. It's always possible. That's why we offer the regrade option. But it's very unlikely. And so if you're sensing me kind of suggesting, if in doubt, then maybe you shouldn't ask for a regrade, that's what I believe. You should only be asking for a regrade if you really feel like, hey, something went wrong. Something isn't right about the way I was graded. Okay, that's the mindset you should have. And if you feel that way strongly, well, then that's what this option is for. So, do you feel that way strongly? Well, let me say a few things with respect to that so that you can decide how you feel. So first reaction a lot of people have is to just look at the mark. And typically in this course, the MTuner grades are very high. The digital lab coat grades are very high. But the two grades that are not very high are the final exam and the peerScholar assignment. In fact, so if we focus just on the peerScholar assignment, in the past, the average on the peerScholar assignment has been in the order of 7 out of 12. That's roughly where people are at, which is not that high. It's in the 60%-ish range, let's say. 60 to 65% is where they typically fall. And that's because it's a very challenging task. I'm asking you to do something that's very difficult to do, to write a concise, efficient, powerful argument. I sometimes use an analogy. It's like I'm asking you to do some complex karate moves mentally. And a lot of students seem to feel like they can walk into the class and they're already able to do that. When in reality, I think most of us have to learn how to do that. And we learn how to do that gradually. And when we start, we're just okay. And that's the situation where many of you are at. So it's not like I expect you to be amazing. I expect you to be kind of just okay. And so don't be too upset if this is one of the lowest grades you've seen in the course. That is fully what I expect. So let's put that away for now and just say, so don't focus on the absolute mark. Oh, I got 6 out of 12. That has to be wrong. I want to regrade. Rather, I want you to do some very careful thinking about why you got the mark you did. And you should only be asking for a regrade if you truly feel that, given everything I'm about to tell you, something went wrong. Okay, so let me start with this part. What do we do to make sure TAs are grading consistently? Let me begin by showing you a rubric here. All right. Hopefully you can read this well, but I'll include this as a PDF that I put online, so you'll be able to see it there. This is, first of all, this rubric, let me say, is created by the person who will do the regrading. So we picked one TA, and we asked this TA to think very carefully about what I asked of you and how we should evaluate what you did. That TA produced this rubric, which was then shared with all the other TAs. We then had a meeting where we went through this together to be sure everybody was clear, and we're going to go through it together with you now on what was going on. And then we went through in the order of 4 assignments altogether, where first of all, every TA kind of looked at the assignment, looked at everything, and then came up with their own grade. Then we talked about the grades that we came up with, and we kind of, not argue, I'll use the word argue, but we discussed any differences. If one person thought this was a 9 and another person thought it was a 7, we talked about why there was a difference, and we kind of came to a consensus as a group as to what was the valid thing to do. So we spent a lot of time thinking together, analyzing these assignments, applying this rubric, and then ultimately coming to an agreement about what the right mark should be for a given assignment. And so all the TAs went through this together, and then they went out and graded their various assignments with this rubric in hand, regularly consulting it. Okay, so when you're now looking at your grade, first of all, you should see your grade broken down by these 4 categories. Let me just be clear about that. The quality of your draft and the quality of your final paper. The appropriateness of the revision that you did, and the quality of the comments you gave to your peers. So you should see that 2, 4, 3, 3 breakdown. So you'll see very specifically where you may have lost marks. And there should also be comments from the TA where they elaborate on why they took off marks. So make sure you read through all that and think about it in detail. So now let's go through this, some of this together. Draft and the final. So these 2 things you kind of, we apply the same mindset when we grade them. So the first thing we realize, by the way, is, let me highlight legalization here, a big way people lose marks, which is just kind of a shame, but it's a good valuable learning thing, is they don't actually think about what I've asked you to do. What I asked you to do was to create an argument, either pro or con, the legalization of marijuana. What many of you did was not do that at all. Instead, you said marijuana is good or marijuana is bad. But keep in mind, I kind of talked about you know, the CAMH argument that I threw out there, where CAMH actually says marijuana is bad for developing brains. But because of that, and because these students, these young people are getting it in illicit ways, we can actually control the young people getting marijuana better if we legalize. So CAMH said, bad, legalize. And it's a good example that, you know, you can have an argument for legalization that goes beyond whether a certain substance is good or bad. Pop is very bad for you, very, very bad for you, probably worse than marijuana, you know, any kind of soda pop. And yet we allow it to be legal, and alcohol and cigarettes. So we sometimes have things that are legal that we know are bad for us. And so just saying something's bad is not an argument for whether it's legal or not. So many of you made this mistake that, you know, we could have essentially given you 0 for not answering the question. But because there was so many of this, we decided we would accept you arguing good or bad, but we deducted 0.5 from either the draft or the final if you did not follow the instructions. Okay, so you may have lost a full grade just because you did not read and do what I asked you to do. If that's true, you should be happy you just lost a grade, because it could have been worse. Beyond that, we looked at, did you provide persuasive arguments? So is there some power, some punch to your argument? Did your arguments fit one theme or approach? So this was the idea where you were supposed to kind of be arguing one big point. You might have several data points related to that, but a lot of people talked about the economic things, they talked about the human rights things, they talked about whether it was good or bad on a physiological level. They kind of bounced all over the place, and therefore their argument, the thrust of their argument, was not clear. So we're looking, you know, is there a clear and obvious thrust? Did you support your claims? Did it feel like an opinion piece or an argument piece? An opinion is what you think. An argument is why other people should think what you think. and it requires you to have some reason for them to accept your point of view. And so we were looking for some sort of reason for somebody to accept your theory. Generally speaking, was the argument powerful, clear, effective? And as a side note, as we mentioned here, a perfect mark should be a very hard thing to obtain. Strong, powerful, efficient arguments are hard things to craft. So if someone does it really well, we're perfectly happy to give a perfect mark. But we don't want to give these out like Smarties. Okay? So that's about what you wrote. Think about that. Look at your pieces. So kind of see what the TAs gave you. See why they gave them to you. Think about these points. See if you agree with it or not. Now, a lot of students seem to think this is really what the peerScholar assignment is about, and it kind of is, but that's 6 of the 12. The other 6 of the 12 come from these other 2 parts that are also critical and really important. So first of all, with the appropriateness of the revision, you submitted a draft, you got a bunch of peer feedback, and then the question is, what did you do with that peer feedback? So the TAs, just so you know, would read your draft first. They would read the comments that you received from your peers, and of course they in their head are thinking, what would I have done with these comments? And then they see your revised version along with your reflection piece. So they get a sense of the changes you made or didn't make, and your justification for making or not making those changes. They also see your usefulness ratings of the comments, which is handy. I mean, if somebody tells you something really good, and then you mark it as not useful, you know, that suggests to us a bit of a problem in seeing the value of those comments. So this is where we kind of get at that, what we call your receptive communication skills. So we want to see, did you use these comments to improve your paper? We do take in mind the comments that you've got. I mean, if you got all crappy comments, it's hard to do this. But that's very unlikely with 6 peers. You must have gotten something useful. Did you manage to improve your paper on the basis of the comments? What did you do with these suggestions? So we use the word appropriate a lot here because sometimes the appropriate thing to do is ignore them. These are peer suggestions. Okay, they may be accurate and bang on, or they may not be. How good were you able to tell the difference? So this is a little subjective, admittedly. You know, this is the TAs who are much more experts. They're like higher level black belts or higher level karate people than you are. They're trying to decide how well you use this information. When we get to the reflection piece, we're especially interested in the situations where you did not, where you ignored your peers. Did you have a good reason? Did you have a good justification for not making changes that were suggested to you? So the peers are looking at that very carefully. And here with these little side notes, we also kind of looked at, so we talk about these inline with criteria for final, whatever, just the appropriateness of the comments is decided by the marking TA. There's nothing we can do about that. The TA themselves has to evaluate these things as well as they can. If the final is improved from the draft, then you have to have at least 0.5. If you did make the final better, we're saying, well, then they did something appropriate. So you can't get 0 on appropriateness of revision and the final get better. So that's a note we give to TAs to make sure they're thinking right when they go through this. And if no revision was required, so if you had a 2 out of 2 on the draft and none of the comments you got were useful, then even though you might not change anything, that might be the appropriate thing to do. So we just want to stress this, that this is not the amount of change that you did. It's the appropriateness of the change. Okay, and sometimes it's appropriate to not change anything, but that depends on the quality of your original work and the comments you got. And if a TA sees that your quality of your original work was not very good, some of the comments you got were very helpful, potentially, but you did not incorporate them well to improve your work, then you're going to get a low mark on this. All right, so think about that. Work all through that. And then finally, the comments that you gave to your peers' work. I was very clear about what I wanted here. So yeah, you're giving a rating, you're giving a positive comment, but I stressed right from the beginning that what we're really going to focus on is your constructive comment, and that we want to see a few different things here. we want to, if the peer did not follow instructions, we would like to see you point that out. You know, whether they tried to talk about too much or whether they didn't provide an argument on legalization like they were supposed to. You know, it would be nice if you actually let them know that. Did you highlight the one part of the paper that could be improved that would maximally improve the work? Okay, so we want to see evidence of your critical thinking there. Did you identify something that really needs to be improved, and did you explain that well? So the person knows, okay, there's maybe a weakness in my work. And did you also give them a sense of how to make that weakness better? So we want to see critical thinking here, and then we want to see creative thinking here. You know, we want you to be helping your peer. You know, maybe you should try this, or here's an idea of how you could remedy that. We want to see that. So you gave ratings to 6 peers. You can almost think of each one being worth a half a mark, where we're going to go through and look, you know, did they highlight if the person didn't follow instructions? Did they highlight the major problem? Did they suggest a way to improve it? Relatively easy. Okay, and it should be relatively easy for you to look for those things and to see why the TA gave you the mark he did. Again, a few side notes here to think about. Marks should be assigned only for comments containing depth that deal with the argument. This was about the argument, so just saying, you know, you use too many commas or whatever. I mean, that's fine, but that's more like an inline comment that you could have made. Here we want to see something that's more about helping the person enhance their argument. If a student claims that there's no room for improvement in the peer's paper, read the peer's paper. So we have the peer paper right there. We can look at it. And you know, it's fine to say there's no room for improvement if it's a perfect draft, but if it's not, if we look at the draft and say, oh, there's all sorts of ways that could be improved, then this suggests you just didn't take the time or effort to find anything. So again, we're being sensitive here that sometimes if you get a really strong draft, it can be very hard. So we're taking that into account and we're thinking about it, and you should too when you're looking at your comments. And be aware that peerScholar is currently, what? No, that's not right. We'll ignore that. That was fixed before the assignment. So it is true that we did have some issues about peer usefulness, and so the TAs were instructed not to look at. They see this thing about the average usefulness of the comments you gave, but it wasn't being accurately derived. So we just told them ignore that. Just decide that for yourself. Look through all the information. Okay. And then we say as well, with respect to the comments, please try to say something positive. But I mean, this is a lot like what you're being asked to do. We want them also to highlight the things that weren't working well and giving you some idea of how they can be improved, just like we ask of you. Okay? So I walked through that all. Right. So now, here's what you should do. You should look at your peerScholar grade. You should go through thinking about everything I just talked about. If you think you're ballpark, like don't be asking for a regrade. Well, you can do what you want, but I wouldn't recommend you ask for a regrade if you're thinking, oh, 0.5 this way or 0.5 that way. You know, you should feel like, wow, something went wrong. The TA was not following this rubric, I don't think. Something messed up. I really don't think that happens very often, but if you feel that, then you can ask for a regrade. And I had a link, or I will have a link on the website that shows you how to do that. Okay, a little form you fill out to do that. The process from there will go as follows. When we know who we're regrading, we will remove all the TA information that's currently in peerScholar from peerScholar. So we'll take it out and we're going to make a copy of it on the side. And then the TA who created this rubric will then go through all of those regrade requests and will grade them again without knowing anything about the initial grade. And then you get whatever grade they give you. So if something went wrong, that may result in a higher grade. I want to be clear, it may also result in a lower grade. You are taking a risk because you will get whatever grade the regrade TA shows you. All this to say, you'd better be pretty certain something went wrong because you're taking a bit of a gamble. Okay, so, and really, I mean, this costs time and money, so it's not something we want people to do frivolously. It's meant to catch potential mistakes and to give you the feeling that if you really feel there's a mistake, there's a mechanism for you. it's not one we expect will be used very much or should be used very much. And we try very hard, as I described, to be as fair as possible, to train our TAs well so that problems do not happen. At the same time, it's a 1900 student class. So, you know, things do happen, despite the best preparation, but they shouldn't happen very often. All right, so that's what I have to say. Go through all that, check it out, see what you think, and if you really feel wronged, then feel free to ask for a regrade. We're going to try to get the regrade process happening right away so that we can get the new grade out as soon as possible. That's what I got to say. Good. See you later. Hope you learned a lot.